So my name's Daniel Derbyshire. I'm a research fellow on the Inclusivity Project, and I'm going to be chairing today's session. We've got two speakers for you to hear from, as I'm sure you're aware, Ruth Gawthorpe from Smart Working Revolution and Paul Banks from Fresha Catering. Before that, there's just a couple of bits of housekeeping that I'd like to go through. So one is, please do open up the chat and just pop in an introduction for yourself. Just tell us who you are, where you're from. The other thing is that we are recording this session, both video and audio. So if you don't want to appear on the screen, then just make sure you keep your camera off and or muted if you don't want to be on audio either. One of the other things is that feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along, but we'll ask the questions to the speakers at the end after they've both spoken. Thanks to those of you who've introduced yourselves in the chat as well. Let's have a look what we've got. So we've got a range of firms. We've got a few smaller firms with just 1 or up to 5 employees, a few bigger ones with 20, 50 plus. A range of options in terms of what staff are doing at the moment, working from home, a mixture of working from home and still in the workplace, and then some still in the workplace. And then in terms of current working arrangements, so many of you think that you have some flexible working arrangements at the moment, and this will increase as a result of COVID-19. A few of you think they'll stay the same. Some of you don't have any at the moment. So nice range of kind of firm sizes and situations at the moment. So just before we start, I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the webinar, kind of schedule. Just before that, I'd just like to introduce our 2 other team members with us today. So we've got Ishmael, who's on the chat. You've probably already said hello to him in there. And we've got Laurie, who's going to speak more about the project towards the end of the presentation. So something to look forward to. There we go. So an outline of the webinar. So as I said, we're going to hear from 2 speakers about their experiences over the last few months, the current crisis, obviously, and their kind of expectations of the next 6 to 12 months going forward, even beyond that as well. So we're hoping to engage you in discussion regarding the challenges that you're facing and the steps you've been taking to combat the current crisis, but also more generally in this kind of topic area. Finally, we'll provide a short update on the Inclusivity Project, the support we've got available, and some research opportunities. That'll be split. I'll do a bit of that at the start now, and then Laurie will pick up the kind of in more detail towards the end. So the Inclusivity Project, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who've seen this before, I apologise, but nice to go through. So we aim to get small business perspective on employing people who are either older or disabled or have long-term health conditions. That's what the Inclusivity Project is focused on. We've got both national and local ambitions to improve health and well-being of the workers and potential employees, and again with particular focus on older, disabled and people with long-term health conditions. And we've got a strong research base across that in terms of research, analysis and understanding of workplace health. And again, Laurie will explain a bit more about that towards the end. Just to kind of say that we're funded by the European Regional Development Fund and the Southwest Academic Health Science Network. And we also have a number of partner organisations on the project, including Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Enterprise Partnership, Disability Cornwall, and Age UK Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. And so that you can see how they kind of connect into what our goal is to connect with businesses, people with disabilities and older people. And so we've got a really strong kind of network of local interest groups that help us achieve those aims. So now just to kind of come on to the topic of the webinar a bit more. So there's been a lot of talk about this kind of contrast, I think, between the new normal, which has become a kind of buzzword over the last few months, but also a lot of people talking about us going back to work. And I think that many of us are, by this point, are starting to realise that we don't want to go back to work in the sense of going back to the way things were, because there are many kind of issues and things that we can look to change as we go forward. And so it's recognising that as we return to work, if you want to call it that, that actually we can make improvements to the health and well-being of our employees as we do so. One important thing to note is that there are big sectoral differences in the way that this operates. For example, in information communication technology, you've got 84% of people reporting that they were either working remotely or from home, whereas in construction, that's only 27%, for kind of obvious reasons about the need to physically be at construction sites and all this kind of stuff. You see similar differences in terms of the rates of furloughed workers, big differences ranging from 80 to 20%, depending on the sector. And I think that actually, I was thinking about this last night, and I think that our two panel speakers today kind of represent that kind of sectoral difference quite well, kind of coming at different kind of ends of that kind of difference in terms of sectoral. There's also the need to consider technical and practical solutions, which are going to be specific to these sectors, because what works in one sector as we start to go back to work with social distancing measures, etc., won't necessarily work in another sector. And so at this point, I'd like to then introduce our first speaker, who I think will speak very much to that last point that I just mentioned about needing to kind of have very tailored solutions. That's Ruth Gawthorpe from Smart Working Revolution. I'm going to operate the slides for us. So Ruth, if you just want to say next whenever you're ready, and I'll hand it over to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this session today. I think I tick all of the boxes of the Inclusivity Project. Obviously a little bit older than I was. I am disabled and I do have long-term health problems in that I too, Laura, am asthmatic. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my story with you today. I'm the CEO of an organisation called the Smart Working Revolution. We've been implementing smart working options for the last 20 years. And we started in an organisation called Domestic and General in the middle of Nottingham, where the calls dropped off between 12 and 2, and we were asked if we could split the shifts. I was an HR director by trade, so obviously I was concerned about the retention issues. So I went away and thought about what we could do instead of splitting shifts. It's never a good thing to do. And we came up with this idea of a gym team where we gave people, we piloted it with 12 people, and we gave them access to the Virgin gym next door but one for an hour. And then they came back and had lunch together for an hour. Obviously we weren't paying them, so productivity went back up. But also we found that absence dropped off a cliff because they were just as fit as butcher's dogs. And so we at the same time, my co-founder in Smart Working Revolution had just qualified as a master NLP practitioner. So we went in there and we trained them using his brain food, and the sales went up by 19%. So we got carte blanche then from the operations director to put in any weird and wonderful solutions that we could. And so over the last 20 years, we've then built a number of different options, ranging from things like flexible start and finish times to home working and mobile working. And I shall be sharing with you the workforce model that we've built, which has got 50 different options within there. So if we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Dan. So 20 years of implementation. So we've made the mistakes really so that you don't have to, and we have made mistakes. There are pitfalls with implementing different forms of smart working. We call it smart working, by the way, because we started off calling it the flexible working revolution. We went to talk to leaders, and whether we liked it or not, they were associating the word flexible with women returning from maternity leave. When we started talking to them about it being smart, then they began to listen again. So that's why we called it the Smart Working Revolution. We're very fortunate that, for example, the civil service call flexible working, their form of flexible working, smart working. So we believe it's more of a philosophy, and it's got a big wrap around it. So yeah, as I say, we've been implementing all sorts of different options over the years. And then 7 years ago, I had an operation on my back. And when I woke up, they told me that I'd moved. And I ended up in a wheelchair for a year. And it made me realise just how many people, millions of us actually, cannot do the commute. I haven't been able to move my right foot since that point. So I've had to really look at how I change the way that I work. I can hobble, and I do hobble. And actually ending up in that wheelchair and having this disability had a very strange effect on me. I decided, the operation took place in October. By January, I was in India, in my wheelchair, being pushed around by my lovely husband. And I did a big transformation and an offshoring project for a year out there. And I followed that up by doing another 9 months in Poland, doing a transformation. And then I began to think, I think I need to calm down a bit. And so we set up 2.5 years ago the Smart Working Revolution, and we've been helping lots of organisations to put some smart working options into place. Some of the people that we've worked with were actually ready for lockdown, because any of our clients that we'd worked with, we were on the blower to them saying, right, you need to get yourselves sorted out. And so they were able to move to a lockdown and remote working overnight. They'd certainly been able to be more inclusive in their organisation. That was one of the things that we were really keen to do. There were other organisations who we could see were struggling, and they had to sort of take this leap of faith overnight that they were going to trust their workers, and that's what this is all about. It's trust, and two-way trust is the oil in successful remote working. What I'm hoping is that they'll move out of lockdown with a different view on the fact that they can trust their people, because loads of people that we've talked to, loads of leaders are saying productivity is sky high. So I'm hoping it's going to be good news for smart working. So next one, Daniel, if that's okay. So this is a smart workforce model. I'm not going to go into great detail with this because it'd take me half a day, but you can see that we've split our model by flexible location, so basically hub, mobile, remote and office, and then there's a number of combinations in there as well, and flexible contracts and hours, so part-time day, demand-led, unique shifts and gig. So it's a wonderful thing in terms of people who are older or disabled or have those long-term health problems, especially at this time, because I think there's going to be millions of vulnerable people within the UK workforce who aren't going to be able to go back to the commute and to those and to the office. So I think actually it's a great time to help organisations to be more inclusive and think about what their workforce model might look like. When we're implementing smart working, we don't suggest you put all these into place. We suggest that you work out which will work for your organisation and which will not. And one thing that we do say is, top tip, different options require different personal attitudes. When we started out, we thought that the best remote workers would be introverts, and we were absolutely wrong. Introverts actually like hubs. They like getting into little cubby holes, getting their head down, doing their work, being productive, and then coming out and having a chat when they hear something that interests them. Actually, extroverts make pretty good remote workers because they make the contact with their boss, their clients and their colleagues. So that just gives you an overview of the different forms of smart working options. So perhaps we can go to the next one, Dan. And these are the benefits, and I'm going to concentrate on those in society really for this particular session. So it will give a fairer distribution of work, and it gives more focus on the family. And I think that is really crucial. And I believe that everybody in this country should have a purpose in life. And I think by implementing these smart working options and having things like being able to work remotely or work in a hub or travel at quieter times, we're more likely to involve those people that are sometimes not included in the workforce. So I do think it's crucial. And the next slide, Dan, because I don't want to take up all the time. This is a model that we have just put into place. We've been working on this for some time, but I'm going to very, very quickly run through this. If you look at the bottom one, which is almost tier 0, this level's made up of jobs that can't be done unless you're physically there to do it. So, you know, the builder, the plumber, the electrician, the train driver, bus driver, my hairdresser, I can't wait to see him, the dentist, the surgeon, the barman, and so on. But there are many smart options that can be applied to this category, such as flexible start and finish times and part-time, annualised hours or compressed weeks. The problem is that for decades, traditional leaders have been pushing other office-based roles unnecessarily into this category. So you've got in there roles such as recruitment, accountants, claims handlers, contact centre advisors, GPs to some extent, and lots of admin roles. If you go up to level 2, this is where, level 1, this is where millions of leaders were caught napping when lockdown occurred. And they found it difficult to move to remote workforce. It took them quite some time to adapt. For decades, they'd been requiring people to be present in the office and partake in that Monday to Friday. And so they, at the moment, are residing in what we call tier 2. This is where they had to take a leap of faith with the lockdown and trust their people. And they've begun to realise that the people they so carefully recruited can be trusted. They are, after all, adults bringing up the next generation and driving fast cars and paying off their mortgage. These leaders have seen their people and themselves. They've learnt how to use Teams, WebEx or Zoom, and they've noticed the productivity has gone through the roof. It's a little bit tricky doing board meetings or training, but they are coping. The tier 3 ones, those leaders are already there. They were the ones that had bought in the necessary tech in advance and were able to move to full remote overnight. And some of the forward-thinking 2 tiers leaders will aspire to go into tier 3. Unfortunately, there'll be some dinosaurs who probably drop back down to tier 4. When you get to tier 1, when you get to tier 4, trying to rush, you see, trust becomes the oil in the successful smart workforce, and each business designs its own unique workforce based on customer peaks and troughs of demand, and also they look at the product, the culture and the geography of the business. They are more likely to have a distributed team, which may include remote, home, hub or mobile workers and various shift and contract types, so that they can attract from the best they can attract the best from a wider talent pool, and they're the ones who are most likely to be inclusive. So tier 5, what's at tier 5? Well, these are the organisations of the future who recognise that the workplace is a fascinating, dynamic, blended and evolutionary organism that will necessarily have to change to match its environment. So I think, you know, they're the smart leaders of the future, and I think they're the ones that will be more inclusive than those at the bottom of the tiers. So that just gives you an indication of the different tiers and levels. And I think the question for you is, where are you now? Where do you want to get to once we get out of lockdown? And I think that probably is about me done, Dan.
Yep, that's fantastic, Ruth. Thank you very much for that. I think it's really interesting. You've got one more slide, by the way, you know.
Have I? Just push it on then. Oh yeah, just a quick reminder that we are in the midst of putting together this Smart Towns and Villages concept, which will be wonderful for people with disabilities, for people who live in remote parts of the country. And we're concentrating our efforts on Cornwall. So we're starting this in Cornwall. We want Cornwall to become the smart capital of the country. So we're talking about making it more inclusive, about providing opportunities for hub and remote workers using superfast broadband and 5G. And we're building a skills portal. So if you know of anybody within inclusivity sort of community, then we're taking CVs so that we can build them into our portal. And what we'll do is we'll produce talent heat maps of the, first of all, the skills that are in Cornwall, but then further afield in the UK. And we can produce these talent heat maps that show exactly what talent we've got and where. And then we share them with organisations across the rest of the UK. And they can access some of the people at the moment who maybe don't have work because of their disability, because of their age, or maybe because of long-term health issues, or maybe that their parents or their carers. So I think this is going to make quite a difference to society, and we're pleased that this is moving forward now. Okay, thank you, Dan.
A lot for that, Ruth. I think it was really interesting. One thing that you were saying is that these firms spend a lot of money recruiting people, a lot of time and money recruiting people, and then don't trust the people that they've hired. So it seems like they're kind of making bad decisions in that sense, or something like that. I think something we can pick up in the discussion afterwards. So now I'll hand over to Paul, if you're ready.
I am.
Yeah, perfect. So
I put together some slides that you're going to send afterwards, aren't you? But for this, I'm just going to give you a brief of where we were in March and kind of where we are now, and the kind of assumptions of where we think we might be going. Okay?
Yeah, sounds perfect.
So my name's Paul, and I am the owner-director of a catering company called Fresha. We are based in Exeter, but operate around Devon. And the reason that I'm here is I'm part of the advisory board for the project. And so they've asked me to do a short talk. So just to give you some of the headlines, when in March, Fresha employed 60 people over 12 locations with 27 different contracts. We had 7 vans flying around, and on a typical day, we would feed about 2,500 people. In 2019, we had 23% growth, which was exceptional. And in 2020, in the first 2 months, we were 19% up on the previous year. So we were heading for a good year and kind of looking forward to it. Where was Fresha in April? We've got 58 employees on furlough. We have 10 locations closed. The 2 locations that are open were necessary because of the services that we provided, but those organisations actually pay the salaries of those 2 people, and so we have a no-cost situation. We now feed less than 100 people in a typical day, and we are operating on less than 5% of our income compared to March. My brain's a little bit financial, so I'm just going to touch on some financials in the hope that it's helpful, and then move on to the kind of the people and the operational side. We were very lucky that we got a £25,000 hospitality grant from the government that is non-refundable, but you had to be within a certain band based on your business rates, and we were just fortunate we were within that rate by £500 a year, where there's a huge amount that had just missed out. We have taken a government-backed loan to get us through the bumps of furlough and supplier payments and other outgoings without an income. We're not sure whether we're going to need or how much of that we're going to need in the autumn, whether we give some back or we need to keep it, we don't know. Furlough has been great, covering our salaries, and in a different sense to Ruth, we are very operational, and I've just made a list, out of 60 employees, there's only 4 that can really work from home. We can put flexibility in, but actual home working, there's only 4. The rest are, in a sense, produce a product or a service or drive a vehicle. Financially, I've been receiving weekly cash flow reports with creditors and debtors because I just need to know where we are every single week. Our forecast is a rolling 3 months because we don't believe we can even predict or make assumptions beyond 3 months. We are now doing a reopening plan, looking at different locations of when they will open, how they will open, and revenue predictions, which will then lead on to staff predictions. Our best forecast by the end of August only shows a 30% increase in revenue from zero. So running at 30% of pre-virus, and that is our absolute best forecast. So it's, for us, it's critical that we know our numbers because that's going to be part of our survival. Practical things that we've done, we've got painters and decorators in because buildings are empty. And one thing that we are doing is I said that I wanted the offices and the communal areas to be painted in beach hut colours, because when they come back, we want people to feel happy. So we're doing yellows, blues and greens. So it's going to feel very different. All the kitchens have been deep cleaned, and we have paid for a specific COVID health and safety risk assessment where somebody came into one of our kitchens for about 3 hours, went through everything, and we can replicate that in all of the other kitchens. We are now starting a phased return. As of this week, we have 6 people back out of 60. We are looking at early and late shift patterns. Similar to Ruth, we don't like split shifts. We've never done split shifts. So we're just saying that people will have to either start early or finish later. So we have less people in our kitchens, less people in our buildings, and they can, in a sense, have some natural distancing. We will have reduced opening hours when we reopen. We have updated contract employments to cover COVID changes. And whenever there's a government change, we write to our employees via email, and it comes from me and they can directly come back to me. Regarding technology, what are we doing to make it a bit easier when we come back? We're going from a biometric fingerprint clocking in system to facial recognition. That means that there's no touching and there's no contact. We are going cashless as a business. We now have no cash. Our safe is empty. It's all in the bank. And everything will be by card or by phone. We've got new tills and new card machines coming in as an upgrade for that. For all the school contracts we have 16 schools at the moment. We have changed our school payment system to a single system. And again, that's getting rid of any cash from parents. They now have to pay online electronically. And part of going forward, because we believe there's going to be some bad debtors out there, we are now, in a sense, not offering a credit unless you have a contract with us. We've got lots of assumptions, but there's just very few actual answers. Focusing on our employees, our average age out of 60 is over 50 years old. So we, over the recent years, we've really come to realize in our industry that mature employees are better for us, and because they understand commitment, they may have a mortgage, a family, they understand the importance of paying bills, they need to work, and they are much more reliable. So when somebody walks in to be interviewed by me, if they've got a few years on them, they've already ticked the box. Within our industry, we've got mental health, and much more in physical disability. And we have a number of people who work for us with known mental health problems. And we work with them on those. And our view is we try to create a safe environment for them where they feel safe at work and not afraid or fear of work. And the feedback is we've got that right. So in a sense, we are creating a safe place for those people. With physical disability, because of the industry, because it's mostly on your feet, we get very few people who even come to interview with a physical disability. But we get quite a few that come through with a mental health, and they might even declare that within the interview. And we never see that as a negative, because actually if we can provide them with a safe environment, they stay for a long time. And 2 years ago, we employed a man that had been homeless for 10 years and had just got his first accommodation on his own, and 2 years ago, and he's still with us, and he is just absolutely amazing, and his work ethic and his loyalty is just brilliant. The people that we have working from home, if we're talking flexibility, we have a lady that does our account, we have an accountant, and she only comes in 1 day a week. The rest of the time she works from home. We have a lady that does our procurement for our tendering for contracts. She's a home worker. We have an admin lady who is a single mum who already works around the school run. And we have a sales lady who primarily works from home and goes to the client direct from the house instead of coming into the office. And apart from that, it's pretty much face-to-face customer production. We have to be in. So that's my business. Regarding going forward, we have no magic ball. We've written every week. We're writing different ideas and different papers internally to kind of see where we're going. And once a week, we kind of hook up with the government to see what their next plan is and what they're going to allow to reopen. And as I said earlier to others, the challenge now is reopening profitably over the right period of time and not feeling under pressure that we have to race back to work. And I think we've got until the end of October with furlough, and I imagine it's going to take us at least until the end of October. And that's kind of my bit.
That's fantastic, thanks Paul. So I think that point that you made at the end there was very interesting, that a lot of businesses who are going to be expected to operate at reduced capacity when they're allowed to reopen won't be able to do so profitably. And so it's kind of how we get around that issue. So I think now that we're going to start to move towards a kind of Q&A discussion. So at this point, if you've got any questions for the panel, please do pop them into the chat or indicate in the chat that you'd like to ask the question yourself. There is a question already here, so I can use that to start the discussion. It's from Ruth and it's to you, Paul. He says, do you use annualized hours to match the peaks and troughs at all of the kind of seasonality of your business?
We do, and interestingly, a lot of our employees, so we pay overtime. We're slightly unusual in the catering industry that we have a philosophy that nobody should work for free. So we pay overtime in 5-minute increments, but on the same day that if the next day it's quieter, they go home and those hours are deducted. And what we have to make sure is at the end of the year is that we haven't paid them less than their contractual hours. And I would say that in the majority of cases, people earn between about 5 and 10% more than their contractual hours because of overtime.
That's great. Anyone else? Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question for Paul, if that's all right.
Sure.
It's from an inclusivity, I guess, perspective, Paul, and just thinking about your older workers and any other workers with health conditions or disabilities, if you think they're going to be adversely affected in returning to work, or there's going to be a greater challenge for certain employees than others?
There are, and I think it comes probably to some of the older ones, but also those who've got people at home that are at risk. And the fear is mostly coming from those that are going to be customer facing, and they feel they're going to be at a higher risk than those that are, say, working in a kitchen within a team. And part of the risk assessment was to set up our kitchens and cafes and buildings with obviously a level of distancing, but also walkways of how people come in and go out. So most of the areas are going to be a one-way system. We've also just moved our kitchens around a bit to make things more central. So people go to the center of the kitchen to get things instead of to the walls to get things. But at the moment, we're still in that early stage because we've been told we can't open until at least July the 4th. We're not making any announcements because we do believe that the government will make changes in the next month. And one that we think may happen is the social distancing may go to 1 metre for hospitality, because they're saying that at the 2 metre it's just not worth opening. We yet don't know how we're going to handle people that are still at fear of coming back to work, because we don't know how many we have, and we don't quite know what their fears are yet. And that's the kind of thing that we will probably know towards the end of June.
Thanks for that, Paul. So there's been another one, a kind of question comment from Mark, and I guess it's to Ruth, but also kind of more broadly to everyone. So it says there's considerable linkage between the Smart Towns Villages slide with the work CMN is developing around coastal towns and ports. A range of research has shown how relatively disadvantaged coastal towns and ports are compared to other areas. And the points noted by Ruth are already pertinent. So, you know, if you've got anything to kind of come back on that, Ruth, or Paul as well. Yeah.
So I think that that certainly there's great opportunities, and that's why we are concentrating on Cornwall. There's great opportunities because people have got some phenomenal skills in terms of hospitality and customer service and customer care, and you know, at the moment, everybody's sitting at home with the hands tied behind the backs instead of getting on with a job. But even when things are whatever normal is going to look like, part of the year people don't have full employment, and so we think there are some fantastic opportunities. We work with, for example, Saga, and Saga have moved to a smart workforce model that includes flexible start and finish times and remote combined with annualised hours, because you can do that in the insurance industry if you've got, you know, some good technology behind you. So they are looking at maybe whether they can pick up good skills, and we call them in the insurance industry signposting skills, so that you can signpost them to the expert, but you can pick up a call and deal with it. There's lots of other opportunities where we can link organisations, from example in the southeast or Birmingham, with people who possibly don't have full-time employment throughout the year. Can I just come back on what Paul was talking about as well, and it's this fear factor that people have got, Dan, around returning to work. So if you think about it, our brains have kept us safe from birth. And up until whatever date it was, 22nd of March, we felt, and our brains told us, that the commute was safe. And then we went into lockdown. And, you know, our brains are telling us that that commute is not safe any longer. And that's what's happening, and that's where the fear is building. Now, it won't be fear for everybody, but for a lot of people, particularly those who are vulnerable or have got underlying health conditions, and there are millions of us like that, by the way, then I think there will be some fear there. Thank you.
So I think that also kind of relates to the willingness to send kids back to school as well, which obviously affects people's ability to go back to work.
Yeah. It's scary.
So I think Laurie?
Element of public transport. So quite a few people we employ rely on public transport, and that's the first bit of fear, is actually getting to work. So it's how many kind of steps during their day are they scared of, and looking at ways of overcoming that. But once we're in the workplace, we can come up with some plans, but we may also need to look at ways of getting people to work.
Okay, Paul. Laurie, I think you wanted to come in at that point? Oh, sorry, I've just seen you say in the chat. So there's a question from, I can't see it, Laurie, do you want to read it out?
From Laura.
Hi there. Sorry, there was just a question from Helen Newsom to Ruth, I think. So where you have a mixed workforce, some working from home and some having to be present, how do you get over the feeling of resentment between the two groups?
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I can understand what you're saying. I think it's really important to look at your workforce as a whole, and you will actually have some people who do have to be present because their roles are in that that tier 0. But you know, we choose our roles. We choose the roles that we do, and so with that comes some limitations and some challenges. But if you just remember that working from home is not the only option in that smart workforce model. There's plenty of other contract types, compressed hours, nine-day fortnight, 4-day week, flexible start and finish times, annualised hours. There's lots of other different things that you can put into place. The trick is to work out what works for your customers and then build that back into your business, and out of that will come some tremendous smart working options. So yeah, unfortunately, life's not fair, and so we just have to do the best that we can with that.
That's great, Ruth. Thanks for that. So at this point, I think as we're drawing towards the scheduled close time, I'm going to hand over to Laurie to just give a few more bits of information about the Inclusivity Project and just to kind of start the close procedure. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Hopefully you can see the slides back up on screen. Excellent. Just because we started a bit late, I'm just going to very briefly highlight some of the research activity that's taken place as part of the Inclusivity Project across 3 key themes, looking at engaging with both policymakers and SMEs to find out more about the environment in which Cornwall is working, how SMEs are responding to work-based health, looking to become more inclusive employers, as Daniel said, with a focus on older workers, people with disabilities and long-term health conditions. So we're doing that through a number of engagement activities, which were through face-to-face and workshops, obviously moved to a more online and digital engagement with businesses. But there's just a highlight really of some of the work that's taking place. What I'd really like to focus on in the remaining minutes really is how the Inclusivity Project is working with SMEs and how we can support you. So we have a series of engagements through our knowledge exchange activity. And we start these engagement with Cornish SMEs with a diagnostic meeting with businesses. So conversations over a series of meetings to understand where your business is, what challenges you face, and where your organisation sits within the market. And the key objective really is to support you develop innovative new ideas, to develop new products and services that will help work-based health around well-being for your staff. And that could be through, for example, a new digital recruitment process, for example. It could be well-being services for your existing staff, or the development of a new product that you're looking to take to market. So the gateway for engagement with the project would be through our knowledge exchange activity. And as part of that conversation, we would work with you to identify what the next steps would be and how we can support you best. So the key part of this is engaging with both academics and our partners as part of an in-residence. So these are fully funded partnership activities that are mini research projects in their own right. And the project will be able to fund up to 12 days of your time to undertake these activities, which could be around some data analysis. It could be about sort of your market position and areas of growth, and sort of customer engagement activity as well. So we'd work with you, build on the information we've gained from your knowledge exchange activity, and look to deliver sort of innovative and really creative engagements with yourself through our in-residence programme. Following on from that, we'll be able to expand the activity onto a follow-on research activity, which again would help the development of new products and services, or enable access to grant funding to help support that delivery. And that could be the purchase of equipment, software, or other investments that you may need. We've also recently launched a smaller grant fund, our idea generation funds, which would generally be sort of seed funding for an early idea that you may have. Again, looking at the development of products and services that you've got around work-based health and supporting your businesses. So if you'd like more information on any of those, then please make contact with ourselves. There's our website, which we'd point in the direction of, and our knowledge exchange officer, Ruth Gripper, whose contact details will be on the next slide as well. But really looking to engage with you and hear what exciting opportunities you've got from your business perspective. Just to highlight our next in our webinar series. So our next webinar is taking place next Tuesday, and this one will be looking at the accessibility of online working. Obviously, we've all been pushed into remote working, but this webinar will really look at how accessible the software is for people working from home who may have additional needs, and how accessible it is for the whole workforce. So again, you can follow the Eventbrite link or go to our website to sign up to those that webinar. We're really keen to hear from you in terms of additional webinar topics that you'd like to us to deliver, because we expect to be delivering these into the future. And you can either put some comments in the chat box or the feedback form that you'll receive following this webinar. We'd really welcome any suggestions that you've got. Okay, I appreciate time is running out, so I'll just hand back to Dan to close, if that's all right.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So just a final thing to say is that there's contact details there for us, the Inclusivity Project, as well as the organisations of the two speakers. Just remains for me to thank our two speakers, Ruth Gawthorpe from Smart Working Revolution and Paul Banks from Fresha Catering. Thank you everyone else for your attendance, for your comments, for your questions. Like I say, you'll receive a feedback form soon. We've got future events coming up, so hope you can attend those as well. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Take care.
Thank you.